So I got a comment on the last video that I did that was sort of asking if I would ever be interested in talking about some of the furry parties I have gone to, because I have done that. I've gone to quite a few furry conventions and partied with quite a few furries, and they're an interesting bunch. But what I think I'm going to talk about instead is that I do this panel, right? It is a sexual fetish panel, and the idea is that everybody that wants to go to this panel goes into a room and we sit in a big circle, and you take a post-it note, or more lately I just have them write it on themselves, but you take a pen or something and you write down a fetish and you put it on your body somehow, maybe with the post-it note on your head, or magic marker on the arm, or whatever the case might be. And the idea is that everybody has these things that are weird or strange that they're into, or at least that they perceive as being weird or strange. And the thing that I've noticed is actually that most furries, people, when I've done this at a furry convention, TFF and stuff, is that furries have relatively more normal fetishes than, say, like anime fans, in my experience anyway. Anime fans are the ones that, come up or have like all the autopaizuri and stuff like that, the really weird ones, and also the ones that intentionally ironic. Actually I have these guys that come to a lot of my panels, and every time they see that I'm doing it and they're there, they come up and they always write one fetish on themselves, and that's cucking. They're just super into cucking. They consider it the intellectuals fetish, and I've always thought that was an interesting group of guys. And I don't necessarily understand every single fetish in the world. Like vor, for the life of me, I just don't get. It's not appealing to me whatsoever. But I think it's important that everybody have those sort of outlets. So when we do this panel and everybody circles up, we'll have t-shirts in the middle of the room, and we'll bring up somebody from the crowd, usually by random, but sometimes by volunteer or voluntold, and they'll talk about their fetish, and we'll have an artist. And I have a bunch of artists that are really cool and help me out with these panels. And they will just draw this fetish, while what the rest of the crowd does is, like, we say, okay, this person is into autopaizuri, right? And then the crowd will, even if they're not into it, just scream about why that thing is sexy. Like, what is sexually appealing about that fetish. And I think it's this useful tool in understanding other people, because everybody's into something weird. Everybody has some strange fetish that they're into. And seeing that other people can understand you for it, I think, is really helpful for your own mental stability, your own mental health, that kind of thing. And I think when you avoid that sort of stuff and you just sort of boil over on whatever your fetish is and let it consume you with no real outlet, that's how you end up with people like Ed Gein or Jeffrey Dahmer or what have you. So yeah, I think that's an important sort of steam valve on society, is to let out the things that are appealing and sexy to you. In the same way, that's sort of how I view fan service in a lot of anime. So a number of years ago, I got to talk to Greg Aris, who's a voice actor, about how the anime industry was going, and he thought that it was going to die soon. He thought probably 5 or 6 years ago that there were probably only a couple of years left in the anime industry, mostly because at the time the anime industry wasn't figuring out how to adjust to streaming. They've sort of fixed that now, thank goodness. So it's a lot better. Crunchyroll is great, and Verve is a wonderful program, great platform. So it's much easier to legally and profitably watch anime now. But at the time he thought it might die, and he thought a lot of that reason was because of fan service, because some of the only animes that were still profitable were these niche moe fan service animes that were continually selling pretty well despite not necessarily getting very good critical reception. There was one called Heaven's Lost Property that had just come out that he was kind of being derisive about. He wasn't saying anything bad about it, but he was sort of saying, oh, it's a fan service anime, and that's all that it was. And I don't think that's number one, even necessarily a bad thing, but number two, I think fan service has this really important like purpose in anime, and that's to be like this steam valve to society that helps a group of otherwise sort of awkward guys that maybe are not so prone to be able to get physically intimate with people to have an outlet, or at least to discover more things about themselves. Like, I mean, there's always going to be porn and hentai out there, right? But fan service can cause you to realize, oh, I'm really into that. And then I think the really important part of that is you start to ask yourself, okay, but why am I into that? What does that say about me as a person? What does it say about us as a culture that there are a lot of people that are interested in a subject like that? And I think that's one of the great parts of fan service. And, you know, we always wrap up the hentai panel that we do with a big thing about, you know, the tentacle, like tentacle hentai, like why do you love the tentacle? What's great about it? And the thing that I think that's interesting about that is I don't know how many people are in earnest into like tentacle hentai or into tentacles or whatever, but everybody kind of gets it. Like, everybody gets that there is something weird and niche and appealing about this, what was originally like a censorship thing, right? So like, Japan didn't have stringent censorship laws or anything, but a bunch of artists sort of agreed that they wouldn't draw penises, I guess. This is my understanding. If I'm wrong, please somebody correct me, but my understanding is a bunch of artists sort of agreed in the early days of animation that they wouldn't draw penises, so they censor them either with little bars or with blurs, or they draw them as mushrooms, or in some cases as tentacles, because of just sort of the societal cultural standards over there. There's actually a lot of really interesting things that you can date back about Japanese culture, actually. Like, if you've ever wondered why panties are such like a cultural sexy staple in Japan, like they sell them in vending machines supposedly. I've heard mixed rumors on whether or not that's true, but you know, you see it in anime all the time, like people are stealing panties and smelling them and stuff like that. Like, why is that appealing to anybody when that's not really a thing that happens in America? At least we don't fetishize panties nearly as much. And it's because after World War II, when America was stationed in Japan and like bringing over a lot of our Japanese or American import goods and giving them a boom to their economy, one of the things that we brought over was panties. And before that, women really didn't wear panties. So all of a sudden it was sort of a cool niche thing to be wearing panties. And I think that's really, really neat that was a cultural phenomenon because of, you know, a number of things, and we can see that bleeding over today. And you know, even with tentacle hentai, there's actually this is just a bizarre one-off. This isn't actually connected to, you know, Japanese cultural history or anything, but there's this, like, I think it's a wood carving of a octopus like raping a woman, and it's called The Fisherman's Wife's Nightmare or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like an actual piece of old Japanese art that in hindsight is very, very interesting, I think. Just there's no way they could have predicted that tentacle sex would be as big a phenomenon as it is, but it's an interesting little back piece to Japanese artistic culture that I think is really, really fascinating. And just watching like the cultural shift of Japan from a very imperial society to what it is today is interesting to study about and interesting to read about. And that, you know, many of the big companies in Japan today were originally like samurai clans, like, and they keep a lot of their logos and maybe change their names. But that's you know, all a story for another day. It's all super interesting. I'm completely off on a tangent. I also realize I've been like covering my microphone. If you can't tell, I got a microphone, got a new camera, so hopefully all those sync and desyncing problems will be done. Well, thank you for joining me today, guys. This is mostly a little bit of a shorter video because I wanted to test out this new camera and make sure that I can sync everything up correctly, and maybe I'll try and remember not to put my hands over the microphone next time. But until next time, stay hungry.